Okay. Hi, David. We're back with Simple Money, our conversations around money from a different generational perspective. Me as someone who's been in financial services for more than you want to know, but more than 3 decades, and David, my son, who's been with us now almost approaching half a decade, more than half a decade, right?
Sure, we'll call it 5 years. Not quite there, Howie.
Oh, I thought we were 6 years, but anyway, that's okay. I thought we'd rounded the corner past 5, heading to 6.
Yeah.
So we've been talking
Um,
about a financial planner by the name of Ric Edelman. Many years ago, wrote and published both a book and a presentation called "The 10 Reasons to Carry a Big Long Mortgage." And at the time, it was controversial. You know, people view all debt as kind of negative and so forth. And so Rick, who's got a really large financial planning firm, is well respected out there, sort of coming out and saying that people should carry big long mortgages really create a lot of stir and controversy. Today, that would be, going viral, right? So if that had been during our current environment, it might have been much more viral than it was, because that time it's just an article in a magazine for the most part. But anyway, and so we've already talked through the first 7 of those reasons. And today we're going to talk about the next 2 reasons. And then we've added a bonus reason as well. So number 11. All right, Dave. So let's talk about, and by the way, obviously you can go back, and if you're hearing this one before the first 7, go back and listen to the first 7. And along with this, we do have an ebook. If you're interested in the download, it'll be in the show notes. You can check it out. And we wrote it from a fun perspective. We took Rick's original reasons, then we added our own commentary and sort of created a new document. But reasons number 8 and actually number 9 are connected. Right. So, and what it really says is that mortgages allow you to invest more money and do it more quickly, so quicker. So, kind of describe what this is talking about, David, if you can there.
Yeah. So this one, maybe, you'd be thinking about it backwards. It gets confusing when you think that a mortgage can allow you to invest, right? If you have a mortgage, that means you're going to have a payment of some sort. And, many people would think, oh, then I can't invest if I have to spend money on a mortgage and a payment. And, a lot of people think that, you want to get rid of your mortgage as fast as you can. That way you can have no payment and therefore invest. However, mortgages are, debt. They're money that's lent to you that allow you to not put more money down on a house. So you have more money to, have in your pocket. And so when we say that it allows you to invest more, it means usually that it allows you to invest a lump sum more quickly, right? You could put less money down, have a larger mortgage, and that money that you did not put down on the house allows you to invest right then and there as a one-time investment decision. So that's kind of what this is referring to in that case.
Yeah, and I can tell you, for someone that's had multiple mortgages and multiple homes, sort of the normal course of life is that you're going to buy a home. You pay a little bit down, the market goes up, you're building equity. Then for various reasons, you might sell the home. Maybe your family's growing, maybe you need more space, maybe you need less space, depending on where you are in life and what's happening. But in any case, very few people stay in their home for 30, 40, 50 years, and maybe going back to the 1900s and the 20s, and maybe people were doing that more, but they're not doing it anymore. It's very rare in our experience. And one of the other reasons that people tend to say, well, great, so Dave, I get what you're saying. I could put down $200,000 on my house, and that'll give me a lower payment. Or you're telling me I can put down $100,000, I'll have a higher payment, but then I can invest that $100,000. That's essentially what the idea is behind it. And so then the
Exactly.
counter argument that is, yeah, but if I put down the $200,000, now I have a lower payment, and I can have extra because I have a lower payment than the other option. I'll invest that money. And what do you say to that, David?
Well, it's a good point. You could simply sit there and invest that money that you're saving from having a lower monthly mortgage payment. But the reality is that that's a decision you're going to have to make month over month, every single month for the next 30 years. That's a lot of decisions to make, right? In reality, most people aren't going to continue to make that decision. They'll say, oh, this month I'm going to take that money and spend it somewhere else. So it's much easier to make a one-time large investing decision, then keep making that decision over and over and over again. Um, and I think we see that with everyday life, our decisions change rapidly, and if we get a paycheck or a bonus or something, oftentimes our first instinct is to go spend it somewhere else instead of actually thinking through the decisions with it. Maybe a portion of it needs to be invested and whatnot. So yeah, it's much easier to make a one-time decision than a repeated decision, and it can lead to a greater wealth building opportunity for families.
Yeah. No, that's the point. Exactly. That one-time decision is challenging. We all live lives of cash flow. And so, we know consumers don't tend to think about, they don't tend to think way down the road, right? Because I'm almost 60, I'm thinking far more about the next phase of my life, whatever that is. I don't know if I love the word retirement, but that being said, oftentimes people view at the end of their working career or transition to something else as some retirement from something, right? And so that's a whole different conversation. But David, do you find that people in your age group, are thinking, deeply about the future and concerned about the future, and should I be saving, and am I willing to give up going out this weekend to maybe put an extra $300 in my account to grow for my future, to spend in the future, right? Because if you're saving, what you're really doing is you're saving money for your future self to spend later. That's what the difference is.
Of course.
And so, this immediate gratification is a challenge. Right? What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's very dependent person by person. I don't think it's a huge kind of thought for most young people on saving for a future self. Um, I think a lot of jobs these days come with 401ks and whatnot, so people are putting money away that way. But then there's never a thought about anything else. Even if it comes to saving for a house or for other things in life than just that 401k. I don't think that many people give it a second thought. I like I said, I think it's just dependent on maybe where you are in life, what you've seen across on social media, or how you were raised, and it's a relationship with money and investing in retirement or whatever that may be that evolves and changes. And I think as obviously you get older, it's going to become more prevalent in your life. But as a young person in our 20s, I don't know that it's top of mind.
Yeah, fair enough. Although I would say that most people seem to be interested in building some wealth. And so maybe the question is not, are you planning for retirement or saving for retirement? What you're really doing is maybe you're trying to save money because you realize it'll lead to greater wealth down the road, whatever that might mean to you. So to wrap up these reasons right here, one of the things I always think about is challenging. So we're talking about putting a smaller or larger down payment to be able to make chunks of investment. But then you have people that, quite frankly, barely have enough for the down payment on a home and a minimum down payment and so forth. And so, what's their challenge? Because they're not making a decision whether to put the money down or not. They don't have the money. They don't have more money to put down or less. And so there's no immediate investing capability. What do we tell those people?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good point. Well, obviously owning a home comes with a future wealth impact. There's appreciation that most people get from owning the home. And so, that's a great wealth building tool for many people. I know you've come across this and I've come across this, but a lot of times people, their only asset is their home. Yeah. And, they've worked their whole life to make that mortgage payment. And at the end of their working life, they retire, they got a large home of a lot of equity and no other really savings. And that's a lifesaver for them. In many cases, if it was the flip side of the coin, if you're renting all your life and you still didn't make any savings, you don't have that house to kind of fall back or have it into the plan. So, at least getting into a home does have an impact on future wealth. And, I think there's a stat that about like the difference between if you own a home and if you rent a home and what your, net worth overall is, and it's much higher if you own a home.
Yeah, absolutely.
That doesn't mean you can't have great wealth without owning a home, but
it's of course,
just a stat.
Yeah, we see it, but it's an outlier for the most part, right? And that's a different conversation. All right. So reason number 10: mortgages give you greater liquidity and greater flexibility. And why is that? Liquidity is so important, and so describe that reason number 10.
Yeah. So liquidity, having access to immediate cash, or a way to get cash, pretty short term. How does a mortgage give you that? Well, if you put all your savings and investments and your paycheck, if you're putting all that into the home, to buy a home as a down payment and then, as a monthly payment, you're obviously giving up all your liquidity and your cash right then and there. You don't have any savings to fall back on. So actually having the mortgage, why it may seem counterintuitive, is actually giving you flexibility to have cash for other needs in life, or to make that mortgage payment if you need it, and things like that. So it's an interesting concept, because a lot of times you think that you want to pay off your mortgage as fast as possible so that you have liquidity. But 30 years is a long time, or 15 years is a long time to have a mortgage, which is a common mortgage term, or term. And so actually having that mortgage, and a large mortgage, if you have some savings, can lead to greater liquidity.
Yeah, perfect. And 2 points around this. So oftentimes, first-time home buyers or early home buyers, in fact, we had this conversation very recently with the closing. The client wanted to put down, 20%, borrow from a 401k, and put more money down to reduce the payment by a few $100s. And at the end of the day, the very simple question is, well, so what's that do for you? Why is that important to you put this money down? And the answer came back, well, because that way, if I put a larger down payment, ultimately I'll be able to build up my savings again. And so, again, counterintuitive. Well, so wait a minute. So you want to take all your savings that you have today, put them into the house, so you have a lower payment by $300, so you can save over the next 8-10 years to be able to build up your liquidity again. Right, so this makes no sense for the most part, assuming you can afford the higher payment. Now, for some people, they can't afford the higher payment, in which case you have to put the money down. But if you can afford the choice, then that choice does lead to greater liquidity. And what do we find that many people? So that's one part of it. The other part of it is paying extra on the mortgage. And so, what's our advice to folks that are considering that? Because many surveys have shown that the average person sends $300 a month extra to their lender, no matter what the interest rate is. There's no correlation between high rates, low rates. They're just doing it because, again, they don't want the debt. So how do I get rid of debt? Pay extra. But then I'm giving up liquidity. So anyway, what about that, Dave?
Yeah, and the advice can become personal when it comes to interest rate, but in most cases, it might make more sense to take that extra $300, or whatever that number is that people are sending to their lender, and invest it, save it, earn a return on it. That way, you have the money there if you need it for the if in life, and also it's probably going to grow faster, in the market over long periods of time than it would by paying down the debt in the
Because it's
house. So,
compounding, right? And so you get the
exactly.
advantage when the money's outside the house. You have the advantage of compounding. When it's inside the house, is there compounding?
There's no compounding. Yeah.
Is there a rate of return?
Well, there is. You're paying off the debt, so I guess you're saving that interest that you're paying.
Yeah. So
Um,
yeah, is the $300 earning anything for you? Not really. It is avoiding
eh,
the interest cost on $300 worth of your principal
mhm,
balance on your mortgage, and that's a different calculation.
mhm.
What's really interesting is when people have mortgage rates that are quite low compared to the all-time averages and so forth, and they're accelerating those mortgage payments, even though they can earn more in just a basic, money market account, right, or high yield savings account. And so that's
Exactly.
always an interesting dynamic that we try to advise people to avoid.
Yeah.
Um, so right, so that's it. So those are the 10 and the 11. The bonus reason that we're going to just chat for a few minutes about is I'll get there so I can read it to you. And so at the end of the day, you're really not going to pay off your mortgage, right? So you're either paying your mortgage, or if you're paying rent, assuming you want to live indoors, and most people prefer to live indoors with a roof over their head, you may be paying someone else's mortgage. And so reason number 11, the bonus one, is that the reality is you're probably not ever going to pay off your mortgage. And why is that, Dave?
Well, when you own a home, you're always going to have some sort of payment. You're still going to have to pay your property taxes. Those are always going to exist, and you're still going to have to pay home insurance, assuming that you want insurance in case something happens to the home. And then also with owning a home, there comes repairs, problems, maintenance, all that stuff. So you're always likely going to have some sort of housing payment, whether or not that includes a principal and interest payment to a mortgage company. You could get rid of that portion of it, but you always have some sort of payment.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we mean when you're never going to get rid of your monthly payment.
Right. So yeah, because you're going to want to live indoors, right? So no matter what, there's always a cost associated with that. So unless you're going to go off the grid, and, pack yourself up in a tent and go and live out in the wild, it's going to cost you money to live, anywhere in the world. Now, the cost may vary depending where you live, and it may vary where your age, right? So where I live might cost more or less than where David lives, and on a comparative basis, right? Anyway. So the reality is that, from a psychological perspective, if you can grasp the idea that there's always going to be expense involved with housing, living, and so forth, then it really comes back to the choice of what's the best thing I can do with my money every month, realizing we live lives with cash flow. All right. Any other comments, David? So we've kind of gone through the 10 plus the bonus 11. Again, if you want to get a copy of the, our little ebook, we'll have it out there in the world for you to look at.
Yeah, I think the only final kind of wrap up that I would want to touch on real quick is it's not about when we talk about having a mortgage or having reasons to carry a mortgage. That's a good portion of it, but really it's about how can we use a mortgage or use the money that we have and the home that we have to build wealth. Would you rather have a lot of wealth in retirement, a couple $1,000,000, and have a small mortgage payment, or would you rather have no money and have no mortgage payment in retirement? So it's about capturing some of that wealth back, and a mortgage is a tool to do that, among many other tools. And so all these reasons just kind of play into that.
Yeah, well said, David. And we're playing the long game, right? When you're building wealth and creating financial security, and it may not be that you want to have lots of money, but everyone wants security, and generally that means having financial security and the rest of it. So anyway, well, that's great, Dave. Thanks very much, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Simple Money, and we'll see you on a podcast soon. Thanks.